Special day on a wonderful chaos. It's the Andy's hair is kind of doing a lot of fun stuff. That's my
Has personality, and we have for the second time Dr. Lynda Ulrich.
yes. We got Dr. Lynda Ulrich, and we're going to talk to her. This was supposed to be the talk that we had the first time, but I said let's upgrade it to the Conspiracy of Goodness, which was chapter or episode 177. So we're going to talk to her today about the intelligence of slime molds.
And where are we going to do that, Mr. Shalev?
On a wonderful chaos bomb. I put on a hat because I just couldn't stand my funny hair day.
And for those of you listening without the video, Andy had two hairs sticking up.
That formed a perfect circle.
It looked like a peace sign.
Uh,
So, Andy, slime mold?
yes.
Tell me.
This subject, it was interesting. On face value, you'd think, why would I want to waste an hour of my life discussing this? And then there's something that I find radically insightful around understanding the intelligence of these microorganisms. Because I believe that humans have a way of projecting all of this intelligence onto ourselves and believing that we're all empowered, and since we have self-consciousness, we're conscious of ourselves.
Yeah.
That we therefore are then this incredible species that can, is far superior to everything else.
Every living thing on the planet.
Every living thing on the planet. So what I find fascinating is that when we allow ourselves to say, how far is intelligence in things that we're not aware of, we'd see even problem-solving capabilities in things that we would want to call even animals, or something as simple as slime mold, which since we don't see the eyes and the same things that we would see characteristic, a brain, yeah. then we automatically relegate it in our arrogance. I would like to use that word, that they aren't as important or special or as unique or whatever the words are as we are. So when Lynda said, hey, there's an incredible amount of intelligence in the world that we're so oblivious to, and it's problem-solving intelligence. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the videos of octopuses when they'll problem solve, and they'll have they'll put a bottle, and then there'll be something in the bottle, and the octopus will unscrew the bottle to get what's inside. So it doesn't just look at the bottle and it sees it's a problem that it then has to think through in order to figure out how it can get what's inside of it. So those are the kind of things that I find from a perspective of someone living and reflecting and seeing themselves as not the only thing there. I guess that's the feeling.
So we're not talking about mold, we're talking about slime mold. And
in this case, she chose slime mold because slime mold, it has a high degree of intelligence. I did just a quick search, didn't look into it too deeply, but an incredibly high degree of intelligence, including problem-solving intelligence. And then and Lynda, last time we spoke, said she loves this topic and that she'd love to come in and chat about it with us. I never discussed with her what I said before she came on, by the way, so we'll have to see if what I said is anything that I also identify with. But yeah, that was my excitement in the subject.
Nice.
Yeah.
And we had a talk today that you actually don't bring shows on if you're not excited on them.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so, and there might be a subject which seems random, but I've got deeper questions around it, and that gets me excited about a show, because I think one thing that people often do is their curiosity gets limited to the idea of slime mold. And my curiosity is, where is slime mold an example of something far greater that we're maybe not asking questions around? And that's why my curiosity feels like it starts with a very small item and then it goes further.
Nice.
Yeah. So that was it. And let's also acknowledge Lynda has done some great work. She's obviously since 2014, Ever Widening Circles, which was an online platform which just makes a great where good news is performed. The conspiracy of goodness is something she says. She's so I don't want to know if she say the word fed up, but I would use the word fed up with bad news. She said, I want a location. It's good news stories that are authentic and showing and highlighting the best of humanity.
Yeah.
So that was something that I always found really sweet about her. And she's also doing a lot of TEDx talks. So if you have the opportunity, I would check in to see Dr. Lynda Ulrich, and you'll find her TED Talks, which are always really beautiful as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Should we bring her on?
Yeah. Anything else going on? I did a little bit of a soliloquy there. So
yeah, nice.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm doing really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm enjoying the presence of this woman who is visiting me from Cyprus and the exploration.
Are you going to get married?
Of course.
You're getting good, Vambos. I love it. Well, anything you're discovering about yourself because you're with this woman, you met her? And...
I told her today that she's very much like my ex in terms of her femininity.
Okay.
And what I see with her, because also she's older.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
There's more groundedness. And she's gone through a rough journey in her life. And through that journey, I see that she appreciates things which I also appreciate, given my own journey.
Yeah.
And today we went to a spa and we were sharing a little bit about our childhood, and she has quite a remarkable story.
Wow.
And it made me, I saw the sharings on a deep level, brought us very close. So every day I'm just celebrating us in a way. My apartment's really small.
Yeah.
And the fact that we can be in a complete symbiosis in that apartment is in itself
incredible,
quite remarkable. Yeah. But I already knew that before inviting her, that it would flow in that way just because of our interaction.
Any reason why you haven't introduced her to me yet?
We came to the house on Saturday. You weren't here.
Oh, I was here.
No, you weren't. I came down to pick up my...
I know. I heard you. I just didn't say anything.
Any reason you didn't say anything?
Because I thought you'd go back upstairs and I'd see you when you were upstairs, and then you were gone.
Okay. Nice.
Unbelievable. Can you imagine that, Lynda?
I was scratching my head a little bit about that little interaction.
What makes you scratch your head, Lynda?
I don't know. I've lived in two places in the world that are very different about this stop by thing. Where I grew up in the Illinois, near Chicago in the United States, you just go and you visit. That's what you do. You don't call ahead. You just stop by, and then you sit in the backyard on on lawn chairs.
Yeah.
But here in Vermont, you would never just stop by unannounced.
This is a good one. When I was in LA and living there, I would just drop by people's houses and I'd knock. And when I go with Ronnie, she goes crazy. She's like, Andy, you can't just walk up to someone's house and knock. And like, I will go to my old neighborhood when I was like 9 years old and knock on the door to see if the LeBeaus are in or the other one. And I know, like, when I see them, there's going to be a big smile. We're going to hug. And then I could say goodbye. We don't need to spend an hour of just and she says, Andy, that's just rude.
That's the way it is. So I was just trying to process.
She's sitting, by the way, behind the computer right now, which she normally doesn't sit.
And she's stretching.
And I'm waiting to hear the protest,
And she's going to write the protest.
Tonight, I'm going to get it later.
Maybe in the chat.
Put it in the chat, Ronnie.
But yeah, it's interesting you say that. We live in a building, or I'm in a building downstairs here in Amsterdam. And it's so big that there's a kind of an area where Bambos can kind of come in quickly to grab something from whatever he needs. And then, so there is a weird dynamic going on here because it's more of a structure than it is a home.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, I think that's a lovely way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Our family farm is like that. If I don't have salt or whatever, I just go over to my sister's house across the way and take it. We're constantly just digging in each other's fridge as if it was just a community resource.
Yeah. I think in my culture also, my sisters, everyone has a central house to visit. And that would be my sister's house. And, there's always food in the pots. If you come to the house, you might open the fridge and you just help yourself, or you're eating together. But there's a constant welcoming. And I think that's more a Mediterranean culture.
Yeah.
And maybe we're going to get there all over the world because of the pandemic. Now, when we see somebody new that we haven't seen in a while, gosh, we just envelop them. I feel a little bit like an amoeba around people when I meet them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed one other thing to add to this story. I've noticed in my life at times where there's a family unit that has a way of functioning, and then one of the family members dies, who is sort of the epicenter for that way of interacting, and then it just disappears. So there was several instances in my life where there might have been the mother who died, and then I go back to the house where I always felt so comfortable, and then I saw that the dynamic was no longer there.
No, and that's just to wax philosophical for a second. I think that's how I've processed in my professional life the people I've lost, all the patients that I can think of, wonderful moments of connection with this individual. When I learn that they've passed, I always think of some part of them that I'm going to keep with me forever. That person who always told you their best recipe every time. Now, when I'm with people, I tell them what I'm cooking lately. It just, no matter what it is, I think that's part of what we've learned also, is how precious the little small things, ingredients in life are, and how we can keep some of those traditions going rather than do just what you said.
Yeah.
This is why I was looking forward to our show, because every now and again during the last show, so you'd throw in a little golden nugget, a reminder. Yeah, when people die, they always leave that part of us. And also when I ended the relationship and I did this conscious uncoupling, me and my ex, we acknowledged that whatever we appreciate in each other, we're taking that with us anyway. So that was really beautiful.
I tell you, every patient I've lost, children, older people, anybody in between, I always take the time. And you got to manage the meaning of these losses. And so I'm careful about that. I just don't go, oh my God, and throw my hands in the air. And I do usually have a time with my face and hands. But after that momentary grief, I try and really consciously manage the meaning of their interaction with me. And there's almost always something I remember that they taught me that I'll use the rest of my life. So I think that's a way of keeping legacy going and keeping the people in our lives close, whether we can touch them or call them or not.
Which brings us to slime mold. And I got to be honest with you, I don't see a big separation in the topic we're having in slime mold and the connections I make in my own head.
Well,
when we initially were going to do the talk, we said it was slime mold, and me, without telling you, I switched it to the conspiracy of goodness. And then you said, Andy, you do what you got to do.
Yeah.
And so we said, well, we'll come back to this subject. So what was it at that time, and now, of course, still today, that says this is a topic we're spending an hour on?
Well, I think what slime mold reminds me about is the decisions we make and what we prioritize.
Wow.
Because we're giving value to things constantly in our mind at all times, and devaluing things.
Yeah.
That could be critically important to our next step or the future for us all or whatever. And so slime, we'd written recently, when I talked to you that time, we'd recently written an article about the intelligence of slime mold and all the questions that once they started really studying slime mold, all the questions about what intelligence means. And then of course that leads to worthiness. And then that to me demonstrates how important.
Can you slow down what worthiness means? What do you mean by that? So
well,
when we start asking ourselves about intelligence, it leads to worthiness. What does that mean in that context?
So for instance, why should we care about slime mold? I mean, unless you have done a bit of a deep dive, you're going to look for the practical value in things. So, and that's what we're doing from my perspective, too much in the world. curiosity is what got us to the moon before before the computers that we hold in our cell phones were about 1,000 times more more powerful than what we use to get to the moon and back. Curiosity is why we explore the depths of the ocean and the things that come off of that. We don't always have to have an immediate tomorrow return on investment.
Yeah.
And what the journey with Ever Widening Circles has taught us, after curating the internet for 8 years for really good news going uncelebrated, like stuff that could be on the evening news, but all we hear about is the doom and gloom. Yeah. The big picture, the 100,000-foot look, tells me and my team that the only problems we have in this world still are the ones that haven't had enough imagination applied to them.
Yeah.
And imagination about what's possible involves not judging, like just remaining open. Yeah. Not saying, oh, we tried that and it didn't work, or oh, that slime mold has no meaning, or whatever. Now that we are considering building a tornado shelter after living somewhere for 40 years, what does that say about how often tornadoes are arriving on our back door? Yeah. We didn't think we needed them 20 years ago, but now we do. I love the questions that things like slime mold can help us ask ourselves.
Yeah, I as you say, I mean, I look at A Wonderful Chaos, right? And we're often asked, why do you do this? And everyone's trying to figure it out. Like, what's the funnel? What's the money? What's the and then we're looking at one another like, how do we explain it to you? We do it from the purity of curiosity. Like, how do you explain that to somebody who doesn't see that is a value in itself?
Right. I just think it's a matter of having been exposed or not to the way some of the best things that happen in the world are created by people who connected to things no one ever thought to connect. Yeah. You can name innovation after innovation after innovation, and it seems that when we wrote these 2,000 articles, and then we curated 3 times that many or 5 times that many to get only those 2,000, we just kept learning over and over again that things weren't ever like we thought they were, and that that if we're using that criteria, if we're using what we know as a criteria for value or whether something's relevant to solve a problem, we're dead in the water right there.
Yeah.
It should be all about what we don't know.
Yeah.
I've learned that through, tough times interpersonally. I've learned to, instead of thinking about the bad intention of others because they don't think anything like me, I've learned to get curious about how they came to think like they do.
Yeah.
And
which is great right now, because the topic of vaccination is like polarizing everyone. And that was kind of following up from the Trump era. So you get a lot of meaty subjects to dig into around people who will not want to see or understand another's point of view.
Yes. And, and that's just a decision we each make. And we come upon that notion of being open at different times in our lives. And sometimes, I totally empathize with people who are not open to new ideas, because maybe things are in such turmoil in their lives, or maybe they feel so little sense of purpose and order, and life is just unfolding randomly that they can't take any more chaos.
Yeah.
They don't want to know that they've been wrong for 40 years about something. So I'm just hoping our better impulses rise to the top on this. Let's just pick on the vaccination topic. Because what got us to this stage, why we aren't living in caves like we did 40,000 years ago, is curiosity, is a sense of trust and belief in each other, even when we didn't think the other was right. 40,000 years ago, we had to trust each other.
Yeah.
Because we were little bands of 15 to 30 people wandering around the planet, not that many of us. So I think those same things that got us here can get us out of this too. And
you sound like a liberal.
I am as centrist as you could possibly be. If you want to talk politics,
You sound like a conservative.
I am as central as you could be.
I just love, because what I did that, obviously, you know me, Lynda, in the meantime. What I notice is that as one speaks, they have a hard time listening to the intentions of a person, because they'll already have a filter of what they think the person is actually getting to. So it was a bad, poor a humor pointing at a sad thing I find in life, is that as soon as the label comes out, I'm no longer listening to you anymore. And it happens so subtly, and people are so unaware of it happening, that it's as if the echo chamber that they live in is only being further polarized. And that's just a sad. So my humor was poking at something that's actually quite sad for me, actually.
Well, yeah. I'll address that comment with two things. First of all, that's why we don't do any politics or religion on Ever Widening Circles. Not that I don't have my own ideas, not that I'm not spiritual or any of those things, but I'm all about keeping people's ears open. And I notice exactly the same thing that you just pointed out, is that it's so easy for people to just, the first little tweak, the first little notion that you might be religious and I'm not, or you might be liberal and I'm not, or all these labels are really damaging our ability to learn more and have these moments where you go, I had no idea. Yeah. I just love those moments where you go, I had no idea. I was so wrong for 20 years.
It just creates a lot of separation when people live from that point of view that they need to put you in a box. Yeah. And all of a sudden they know everything about you. You're irresponsible, you're this, you're that. And by pointing the finger, in fact, it's like you make the person bad, and it justifies why you treat them a certain way.
Yeah, and I mean, we see it with gender, especially nowadays, because in the whole evolution of our understanding of how we look at gender and sexuality in this period, it's hysterical, because in a way, what we're doing is we're allowing it to be seen as it is for the person. We're saying, how is it for you? And they get to decide, hey, well, this is how it is. And it doesn't connect to how society has labeled things. So now, instead of it just being us saying, hey, curious to see how do you experience your sexuality, and being curious, full of wonder, it then becomes, you are not fulfilling the labels of which society has created. And then it's like, oh, and it's fascinating.
Yes. Well, sad. If I could, I'm going to drop in some little practical tips through this conversation. I know that you guys, aren't a how-to podcast, but here's a practical tip I've learned just for myself, and it may not work for everybody, but for me, because I'm fiery, I come from people who are super fiery. And so I want to have contempt for everybody that doesn't think like me, just like anybody else. I want to do that.
Can you say that again? I just want to see your face when you say that.
I know.
I want to have contempt for everybody I don't agree with. Lynda said that. That could be a quote we're going to put in. Like when Lynda dies and you and I look at each other, we're like, what are we going to carry in our little box?
Okay. Maybe. Okay. Let me word that better. Can we cut that out? No. Let me be a little bit more clear about that.
Can you put that in the intro?
Please.
That's already too.
Okay, let me say that better. My first impulse is to have contempt for people I don't understand, or perspectives I don't. That's my first impulse, just like everyone else. Because just like everyone else, I'm looking for things, I'm scanning constantly for things that can help me survive and thrive. So this is the thing. So if we can all just own it, we have contempt, and we just do, no matter how nice we are. I can guarantee you that Mother Teresa, in the darkness of the night, sometimes felt contempt for the people that were keeping the people down who she was trying to save, right? Contempt is not some character flaw. It's what we feel. And so, but here's what I've learned to do. Whenever I feel that, I feel that thing. For me, it's when my ears get hot. I don't know. You'll have to know when this stuff is triggered for yourself. But when I feel that, I pause. The second TED Talk. And I learned as I wrote that one. I pause and I change my contempt to curiosity. That gets you through it every single time. And people are genuinely taken back because they feel that contempt. Like if you're talking to someone and they go, "Ugh," and whatever, they know they're getting your goat. But then you just make that little switch to being curious. Oh, tell me more. That is so different from the way I see it. But I'm curious how you came to your point of view. And you really mean it. You're not asking that question to get to say what you think next.
Yeah.
That is a problem, is that most of us, when we do ask a question that could fit in that box, like we're truly curious, we aren't truly curious. We just we're just waiting for an opening when they stop talking to tell them our opinion.
Yeah, the transactional conversation. I'm only listening to you so I can speak afterwards.
Yeah, so I just make myself, like, I'll give you an example. Last fall, I was driving down our little main street in this town in Vermont, and there was this kid sitting in a lawn chair at our busiest intersection, and he had a giant poster that says, "COVID is a hoax." Busiest intersection, people are honking, people are waving, people are giving them finger, it was one thing after another.
Wow, he's brave.
Yeah, brave kid. Let's get him on the show.
Okay. So I've had patients who've died from COVID. Try and tell their families it's a hoax.
Yeah.
My sister has a very rare, very fast growing kind of breast cancer, and she had to put her treatments out by about 3 weeks, which needed to start on a given day because she and her husband got COVID. So it's not for them, for none of these people was it a hoax. But instead of having contempt, what I did was I pulled over, and I do this often. I keep a chair in my car. So I go walking up to him, and I pop down the chair about 6 feet away, and I was upwind, so we were social distancing and all that, if people are worried about that part of the equation. And I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so curious about what brought you to this day and doing this. I would love to hear your story." And that's it. And he at first he was really resistant. What's the matter with you?
Yeah.
and I was like really curious how a young man, looked about 20, could be sitting on this street corner on this day with that poster. And I sat with him for an hour. And I understood exactly why he was sitting there with that poster by the end. And, it's kind of like that whole thing. Well, it's not an excuse, but it's an explanation of somebody's behavior. I'm okay with that. I think that everybody's on their own journey, and I don't know.
Yeah.
We got to stop hurting each other when we're on our own journeys.
Well, now you've got me curious. Why was he there?
Well, he was very, very, it sounded like he didn't have a supportive household that he grew up in. It didn't sound like there was a lot of guidance there about how to look at the world. And I don't even get me started on on letting our kids be raised on the perspectives of the internet. And because that could be a whole nother show that we need to have a chat about. But he didn't come from people who really helped him manage the meaning of the world. And he was getting all his meaning from a very narrow path on the internet that was all about, I don't know much about it because I don't see this on the internet. I really am careful about my algorithms. But apparently there's you can probably name it. There's some organization, there's some group or movement where somebody thinks there's 12 people in the world that have so much power that they're just playing us all like marionettes.
Of course. What do you mean? Come on, Lynda. What planet are you living on? It's called the Kabul. Kabul. Of course. They're all there, all 12 of them.
Yeah.
And they've never died. They're always 12.
Yeah.
And they're like the disciples. Yes.
Well, this young man, this was his truth.
Yeah.
And everything about it was his truth. And he was not curious about me, and I did not tell him what I thought. Just so you know, as hard as it was, I stayed curious and not contemptful. But, he was a beautiful person inside, hurt in some ways, I could tell, and we all are. I'm beginning to think 80% of us have had childhood trauma that left us carrying a burden. Some of it, us carry it better than others. I have, my husband has, So anyway, who knows where that whole, the origin of all this comes from. But, he was very gentle in the end, and he really came through. And when he discovered that all I was curious, then the floodgates just opened up, and he was a very nice person.
Yeah,
who
I'm sure he was actually just longing for what everyone else is, this connection and to feel seen.
Yeah, and I definitely think you're absolutely spot on in that. Don't we all want to just feel seen and heard? Yeah. Me too. Me personally. I just kept saying, hey, this is me on Sundays. So anyway.
How does this all work its way back to slime mold?
All right. Well, I had to go refresh myself, and I have quite the notes on slime mold.
I was going to say, where did someone find a white piece of paper yellow piece of paper that has, it looks very clinical, what you've shown us.
Well, as you can probably tell, I can get off on tangents. And so I always make myself thoughtfully come into interviews like this. I do at least an hour worth of homework before every interview I do. And when I talk to others for my podcast, I do at least an hour's worth of homework. It absolutely makes me a little bit crazy. The number of people who'll interview me and they don't even know what I've done or why they're talking to me.
Oh, wow.
I just think we got to slow down. And we have to stop going through the motions. If what we do matters, then we have to treat it like it matters.
Yeah. We do a show a day, as you know. Every day of COVID. We're at 256 right now.
We've had like 3-4 months holiday.
Yeah, we took some holiday in between. But the funny thing is the one thing that now I always talk to Bambos, is that we have to have a curiosity around the subject, because the subject itself isn't going to be interesting enough for the hour. So if there's not any curiosity, then we don't do a show.
Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting, because that's the one thing you've pointed out that I say, if that doesn't exist, we don't do it. Even if it is a good show, potentially, it just isn't the format that I want to, in my own life.
Well, that gets back to something I'd like to at least touch on before we finish today, because I'm really thinking a lot about purpose. Mm-hmm. I think the pandemic has given us all time to pause and think about what the purpose of doing a podcast is, or what the purpose of making dinner every night and getting on the table by 6 o'clock, or what the purpose of taking our next vacation is. I think that there is a real craving. This has, these times we question our purpose and the meaning of our lives usually happens in big transitions, graduation, having your first child, new job.
Losing a job, yeah.
Yeah. But I think the pandemic has sort of forced a transition for 100% of the human beings on the planet.
In fact, the last show we're doing before we're taking our big hiatus is 2020 sucked, and I changed everything afterwards. That's the title of the show.
Well, this is the thing. And the reason why we change everything, why we decide to change everything, is because we either had no purpose before. We may have had goals, but goals without purpose is a crazy life. You get in that I'll be happy when loop, right? So purpose gives us a reason to know whether to invest in that vacation or that time spent, revamp the website or whatever. If you've got a purpose, and I think that's what you're driving at with your podcast. If your purpose is curiosity, that's part of the purpose of me starting Ever Widening Circles, was that I was just a genuinely curious person, and I knew that the world was still an amazing place. And my purpose became to prove that it was still an amazing world with that project, to change the negative dialogue about our times. And that's how I guarded my time. If it served that purpose, then I'd spend time doing it. If it didn't make my radar screen.
Yeah.
Slime mold.
So you want to go? All right. So let's talk about the purpose of slime mold. First, let me just give people a little orientation on slime mold. Now, we're not going into slime mold. We're going into how the purpose of this of this next little section is to just bring our awareness up about the questions that we can ask ourselves from things like slime mold. So when I was doing my research on the slime mold for you, if anybody wants to dive deeper, the real expert, the world expert on slime mold is a Dr. Audrey Dusatour. She's at Paul Sabatier University. I'm assuming she's French. I'm assuming it's in France.
Yeah.
But she has some really good, there's some really good YouTube videos about slime mold that are fun. They're very fun. But here's the big points that we need to just know about slime mold before we ask ourselves bigger questions that matter in our lives. Is that slime molds are not a plant, they're not an animal, and they're not a fungus. They're one giant cell, and they can be 10 feet across. One giant cell. And here's the crazy part. They can make decisions. They can learn. They can remember. And they can solve mazes. They can solve problems. Now, this really calls into question what we deem as intelligent. A slime mold, there's a certain slime mold that can even, like if a maze can be solved 2 ways, it has a way of solving the maze both ways and then remembering which is the shortcut to get to the food. And then from then on, if you cut the slime mold and then give that maze to a portion of the original slime mold, it will solve the maze with the shortest route to the food. Now, I would have thought before I knew anything about slime molds that remembering, solving problems, decision-making, whether to go this way or that, slime mold can decide to cut itself in half and then later decide to put itself back together. And these are all things that I would consider a pretty high level of intelligence.
Yeah.
So the subject of this talks to me about what is our mind, because we think our mind is made up. We think our mind does the thinking for us. But they're finding out that our gut has a connection to decision making, and all these other aspects of our physiology have a role in our decision making. And the part that I think is fun to pontificate about, and then even look at how we're leading our lives, or like I said, what are we prioritizing or as a society, is the judgment we make. So once we find out that a one-celled animal 10 feet across can solve a maze, what does that challenge us to be able to do? What can we do better at? What can we pause and be more thoughtful about? How can we just be more curious or more imaginative about solving the problems that we have together? So some of the questions that this whole topic reminded me of is, thinking like the other. Slime molds. So the scientist I remember, she found her purpose. It was by accident. So we're going to bounce back and forth because this whole story makes me think about finding our purpose. She was a scientist studying various different things, and she just wanted to do one experiment on slime molds just to test some theory she had, and she's ended up devoting her whole life to it. And this is the way finding our purpose can be. I've been doing a little research on purpose, and it turns out that you can't find your purpose. You know how sometimes you get in life and you go, "Oh, I just have to find my purpose."
Yeah.
It turns out that the research shows you can't find your purpose, sort of it finds you. And there's 3 ways that a particular researcher that I keep track of, Steve Corey is his name, he's at Cornell. There's 3 ways. One is that you just dive after your purpose. You just dive in and you just keep doing more and more and more because you love it, because you can't not do it. And then one day, whether it's the 7-string banjo or writing articles about goodness in the world, no matter what, you can't stop doing it. And then one day you say, hey, I'm pretty deep into this. I've got an expertise and I do it whether I got paid to do it or not. That's must be my calling. And so that's what happened to the scientist, is that that she she discovered her purpose by just asking one question, having one scientific experiment that she ran. So I look at all of our lives and say, after the pandemic, a lot of us are questioning the meaning of our lives and our purpose. What's one question, one new question we could ask ourselves that might lead us towards that? So that's the first way you can discover your purpose, is to do a lot of deeper and deeper research, was what happened to the scientist. The second way to discover your purpose is quite serendipitous. It's usually one of these big events you get drawn into and then you find yourself very useful or helpful, and you find that it makes your heart soar to be in that role. That's what happened to me. I was a dentist for 25 years and loved people and loved what they taught me. And then one day I got a really sad email from a patient I'd known since he was a toddler about how hopeless he thought the world was. And I went on this great search of the internet to be able to send him a connection to goodness and good news. And when I couldn't find one, I just snapped one day. And I said, that's it. I'm going to write articles every day to prove it's still an amazing world. So I'm in that second category. And the third category to discover your purpose is being around somebody like you guys who have a purpose, and you just constantly, did you ever think that that's why people may return to your podcast? Is because they see you guys living with purpose. They see that this curiosity thing brings them to another level, because that's what the third way is to watch somebody else who's living their purpose, and you just see it more and more often. And then one day you have your aha moment because of the sort of passive mentoring that person did. I think that's why some podcasters are so powerful, is because they are somebody, we don't want to name names, but there's a few really big ones. And, they look so passionate about what they do. You guys look passionate about what you're doing. That's attractive. That's the third way people find their own calling, is to watch others who are in it, deep in it. And
I was thinking about, when you spoke, I was jotting some notes down about when I was in the rat race of making a lot of money and doing little work and feeling totally unhappy, right? The business portion of my life. I remember the 2 or 3 years I looked in the mirror, I said, who the hell are you? I don't like you. I don't really want to be doing what I'm doing, but I didn't have an alternative. And then I was looking, maybe I find another job. I'll look for another job. That was like the first 2 years. And then I'm like, yeah, but if I go to another job, they probably won't pay me as well. I'm going to have to build up my credibility. So it was like this narrative of overthinking the whole process. And then it was like in meeting my mentor who came into my life, and then it was, and I always call them cinematic moments, because it's like, when is the moment when you're like, if I was going to be making a movie, this is a scene in that movie where it'd be like, wow, you made a really massive decision that changed everything the rest of your life. And it's kind of what I would aspire to be, not what I am, but what I aspire to be. And that then, so it was very much the feeling of, and I sold everything I owned and lived in a very meager life, but I was totally happy. And everyone around me thought I was insane. So it was really funny to be in the happiest I'd been, like childhood joy happiness, not Disneyland for a day happiness, but like an undercurrent of the world is good and I'm at peace. And everyone around me thinking he's lost his brain, because what the hell, he had it so good before. And I added to that was, the funny thing was that I was the director of a company, and now I became second to another person, and I was so just passionate about what he was creating and trying to create, and we failed so badly, and it was like the worst effort, but the joy of doing it gave my life such meaning. It didn't matter. It just did not matter. And Ronnie, my wife, kind of just finally said, I don't mind that you do what you do, but please acknowledge it's a nonprofit, because you guys have no intention of making money. Like that was the voice of reason in the background.
Oh, I know that.
Said you need to move out of this one room department.
Yeah. So, and then what I also love what you said, and I see it in our relationship between Bambos and myself, is that I don't even feel like I was the best student in the world, but I spent my time around an individual who was so disciplined and consistent that it was like a vibration. And around him, I could connect to that vibration. And then in time, it started to resonate with how I was in that resonation and how it was to live that way of being in the world. And that was it.
Drop the mic, Andy.
Oh.
Beautiful.
So that was very much my journey. So I could relate a lot, obviously, with what you had said. And Bambos and I discussed it, because there's this one moment which is kind of sad, is that Bambos has read my books like 30 times. No exaggeration. And so he reads the books, and when we talk it on the show, people don't get it, and it's a little bit sad for me because they think, oh, he's idolizing Andy, but what they're not getting is he's trying to focus in on something that is it's like, I got it, but I don't get it. I got it, but I don't get it. And there's something there that when I'm connected to it, I see life feels so much better and more effortless. And when I'm not connected, it all feels like such a struggle.
Yes.
So that's
that's the best representational story of that third category that anybody's ever told me.
Yeah.
It's not the way it happened to me, but I really needed a really good story of how that works, and you just said it. It's like, and now you made me think of a really good analogy with what you just said about how you couldn't really put your finger on it, what it was, but you just knew that when you were in sync with that purposeful energy, it made you feel good, and then you just largely just absorbed it and absorbed it and absorbed it until you could make it your own.
Yeah.
This is like my husband had a wonderful Aunt Anna who would make these incredible rolls every Sunday morning. She lived till she was way into her 90s, and she was still making rolls. In fact, when she died, they just found her at the kitchen table. And we try. Everybody's in the whole family has tried to make these Aunt Anna rolls on Saturday mornings, and they were horrible failures. Now, oops, sorry. A few of my sisters.
We'll edit that one out. Okay. Everyone, you're all good cooks. It's just some of us are better cooks than others.
My attempt, I had all the hubris. I thought, now I can do this. And mine was even worse. So, but it's like that. If anybody's ever watched a little old lady make bread for the 1000th or maybe 2000th time, you can follow the exact same written recipe and not get anything like what she produces. And there's something more than just the hard practical ingredients. There's what she brings to it. There's how long she's willing to knead that dough, how carefully she does. There's some magic there, not to be spooky, but that's that mentoring way of winding up with your purpose is a lovely thing. And it's lovely to be I'm sure this is why I love to tell people to let their teachers know, if you have a teacher in your life that you always tell about, that, she changed your life just because she complimented you when no one else was, or when she encouraged something that you had she saw a little spark. I tell people to let me sure that time doesn't pass without you telling your mentors who they are and what they meant to you. That's I in my dental practice, I make a practice if I know someone's going to pass, maybe they have a terminal illness, I always write them a letter kind of at some point in that process and tell them, like I mentioned at the beginning, what I'm going to remember about them and take with me, because I think that sharing is part of connecting us all to some common thread of humanity that's getting pretty disconnected and threadbare given what's going on the internet and the news. So back to slime mode.
Yeah.
So this is what we could do for a long time with slime mode. It just makes you ask different questions. Thinking like the other is something that the scientist kept saying over and over again. If you look at some videos of hers, she would run experiments that didn't turn out, that were a flop. And then she would try and think like the slime mold. And then she could get to some insight. It was what she needed to do to get to some insight. And I think we're not doing enough of that either. We're not curious enough about others to even begin to think like them. But we're surely not following a pretty old adage, which is, try and walk in somebody else's shoes.
Are we talking about empathy here, Lynda?
I don't know if it's empathy. Sorry, because there's something you said that just hit me like I had a real visceral reaction. Was that it gets to how to know what I don't know. And when you said I have to think like a slime mold, then it's not even empathy. It's like I have to think not like something I know. I have to think outside of what I think I know. Empathy would still imply that there was this person that I can identify with who I could connect back to. I'm guessing. Where it's almost, how do I go beyond my preconceived ideas of what I know even? Which is it's another level of this surrendering because then we'd have to acknowledge that we don't know everything, and that's not an easy thing to do.
This is, what if we made it safe to say, I don't know? What if we made it safe for leaders to say, I don't know? What if we but I know how to, I know how to find out, or I know who to ask, or, I'm okay with, I love actually people who are brave enough, courage enough to say, I don't know. Because I sort of feel like sometimes, and I bet you do this too, I think we all have BS antennas. Like this whole fake it till you make it thing does not exist.
Yeah.
We are hardwired 40,000 years ago to see some new person about 200 yards away on a hillside that's not in our little band of people and try and discern their intentions.
Yeah.
And we had to do it right then from 400 yards. And our brains are hardwired to pick up on all these body language, on all that. And so I really think that that one of our problems is that we can't say we're wrong. We can't say we don't know. And I think that's the first part that we can do to start coming together, is everybody acknowledges what they don't know, and then we can pull that void. And I would be willing to bet that there's not many problems in the world that we can't solve once we decide that somebody else might have the answer that we don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I've said, like, when I'm brought into a job and people will ask me, well, what makes that you're the person for this job? Then I noticed immediately if I try to do a resume or defend anything, I'm not interested in that job anymore, because all of a sudden I have to defend myself, and that's not the energy I'm ever going to feel good in that role. So I'll often say, you hire me for my mistakes. And I know really well what doesn't work.
Right.
Like, I can tell you very clearly what I've done, why it doesn't work. And what does work is so different every single time. For me to tell you what it's going to be would be arrogant, because I don't know enough to tell you that. But I know everyone else that interviews you will tell you that. And one of them will even convince you they know. And then you'll be resentful of them 6 months from now when they fail.
And think of all the opportunity missed with this system that we have.
Yeah.
Right? We wrote an article not that long ago, if people want to look it up. Did you hear that Ernst & Young, I think it's one of the largest accounting firms in the world, has decided to actively recruit people with autism and Asperger's? Because, of course, they've discovered something that's a notion that's been around for a long time. I wrote an article called Every Brain is Beautiful, about the aspects of autism that can be super helpful in society. Gosh, it got to be 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So Ernst & Young figured out that there are certain minds, and now we're talking about neurodiversity, just like gender diversity and racial diversity and all that. Now we're talking about neurodiversity, and they actually use, if you look up, there's many articles about this, that they decided that where they were cutting themselves off at the knees was that their interview process left anybody on the spectrum completely out.
Of course.
Because they were only hiring people who could
had social skills.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. Social skills are like 80% of your job is, can you get along with others? And if you show none of that capacity, it's like you're not even getting into the second interview.
But in that particular field, 80% of your job is focus.
Yeah.
Is being able to focus relentlessly on numbers. And that turns out to be a really good brain skill for some people on the spectrum. So there's a good example of, how often we are the authors of our own demise.
Yeah.
Because of a lack of openness, a lack of questioning, a lack of, like you said, not acknowledging what we don't know.
Yeah. The diversity and inclusion, it's such a hot topic. And what's nice about it is that it confronts society with every assumption it's made about how things work. And it's so confronting that it often ends in defensiveness as well, which is it's like this incredible opportunity to rise up a level of consciousness. And fortunately, us as a society, we haven't figured out how to bring it forward. So the individual that's being confronted can actually have an opportunity to grow. It turns into blame. Yeah, which is
so quick. One of the things that I really love that I've come upon in interviewing people for my own podcast is that there's this great way to get over that if we can embrace friction.
Yeah.
I'm constantly talking to my team at Ever Widening Circles about, we're going to do something really cool. We're going to bring, I have about 6 platforms now, all in different genres, and we can't manage this anymore. So we're going to bring them all under one thing on December 1st. That's going to be really, really cool. So we're going through a lot of ideation. Okay. A lot of friction with nice people. And people want to avoid friction. And I'm saying, no, we've got to embrace.
Lean into it, baby. Lean into it.
We've got to embrace creative friction. Now we all have to do it with this going.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to say, we can fight hard for our point of view and then give in. And then we can springboard off something somebody else said and not make it about our own egos. And there's so much to be done in the way of embracing a little friction and not being so darn sensitive and protective of our ideas or everything we thought last week. I don't know about you, but almost every day I say, I'm famous. On the door of my office there, this big sign says, "This changes everything." Because I've learned, Ever Widening Circles has taught me that I'm so wrong on almost everything I think. There's somebody out there that can improve my way of thinking. And if we can get that to come out of this pandemic, that we were all wrong about a lot of things, like a lot of our priorities and a lot of the ways that we were spending our time or the way we were treating others, and that together, it's not just a colloquialism. Together, we will each bring a little piece of the puzzle that only we have.
Yeah.
And we can build a new future.
Yeah. You're more hopeful than I am. I'm just biting my lips saying, okay, it's all going to hell in a handbasket. Let me just be present with my own emotions and make sure that I take care of my interactions and myself, But,
the only thing I would counter that with is that sometimes we need others who've had just a different view of reality, because that's what we've got now, Andy, is we have 7.6 billion versions of reality.
Yeah.
The internet and the way the algorithms work, you and I don't have the same sense of reality, and let alone the guy that showed up on September 6th at the Capitol in the United States. Each one of us, because our unique view of the world is so now primed by what we see on the internet, and each one of those experiences is so unique. Okay, so I say it is what it is.
By the way, I also want to address that, and I want to acknowledge that it's true, because the individuals I've brought into my life who I've interacted with in kind of the more morbid, futuristic, have very smart individuals, not ones that are dictated by media, but ones that are thoughtful around what a future would look like. They brought forward to me what they perceived that future would look like, which still had the doom and gloom of what I had, but it still had how the world would need to sort itself out in another configuration than what it was today. So in that way, what you say is totally true. And I've even seen it occur, is that I maybe took it further in my own head than what another individual who was even more thoughtful than I was towards it brought to me. So that is true. It didn't necessarily, people wouldn't be happy with the version he gave either, but it opened my head and mind up to what a future might look like. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and we've done this over and over again. That's at the heart of the conspiracy of goodness that we talked about last time, is that my perspective is that a conspiracy of goodness has saved our rear ends over and over throughout human history.
Yeah.
Imagine what it was like during World War II when in London at night. You had to just take your little children. I got goosebumps just thinking about it. And dive down. You had to take your blankets for the night. You're going to sleep with 300 strangers in the subway, and then walk out with your little children and walk back to your apartment down some street, turn the corner, and maybe your building isn't even standing. And yet people made life work out of that. They helped each other. They rose above. We found crazy ways to thwart those attacks, and people were ingenious together.
Yeah.
we could give thousands of examples in
Sure.
history of the same thing. I will acknowledge that human beings seem to need their back to the wall.
Yes, they need their back to the wall before they come together. That's
Yes.
the paradox, is that why does it have to be so
Why?
bad before we figure out that we need one another to get through this? That's the, and
Yes.
and how bad does it have to get? That's the real question. How bad does it have to get?
I know.
Yeah.
But in all those stories of hope and resilience that have gotten us to this day, one of the most incredible PBS series I've ever watched is the series about women's suffrage. My husband and I watched that. It's like 4 nights. It was unbelievable to think of where women were not that long ago, like just 110 years ago, and what they had to go through to change that. Now, come on. We human beings have had some horrific practices and ways of thinking about how the world works, and we've turned it around. So I don't know. I know about the problems of the world. It's not that I'm rose-colored glasses, but I'm choosing to look at all the times we've saved ourselves.
Yeah.
And I really think that, and this is another thing I just wanted to brush. I know we're getting long here, but we mentioned gender a few times. I mean, not gender, but diversity a few times. And I think it's the time, and I'll leave people thinking about this if you're needing to wrap up. I don't hear a lot of people talking about age diversity. Because what we've just been through, or what corporations go through, or whatever. I recently interviewed on my podcast Chip Conley. Have you ever heard of Chip Conley?
Of course I know Chip.
Yeah.
He's got the whole thing in Mexico where he has the people that have the wealthy people that have retired in Silicon Valley when they're trying to rediscover themselves.
Yes, exactly. So, Chip was the wise elder in the group that the founders of Airbnb hired.
Yeah.
Now he was 43, and he was the wise elder because they were 27. But they needed someone who had been through the trenches and knew how to get from A to Z without just a ton of costly trial and error.
Yeah.
So he brought a perspective that they could never have, no matter how smart they were. They needed just somebody with years.
Yep.
To come to the table. And I think this may be what saves us in the end, as our back gets closer and closer to the wall, is that we've got this whole generation, the Gen Zers, who are digital natives. They're the first digital natives. And they can run circles around any bad actor that's older. And there's no bad actor. There are some very funny examples of how they've already done that, which are too political for me to mention right now. But I believe that the Gen Z, if you go back through history, that this is repeated archetype of generations. They want to be net contributors, and they have the biggest stake in our future because they're going to be around the longest.
Yeah.
And so I really think that if we can harness the energy like we all have when we're 16 to 25, and the wisdom that we have after we've been around the block quite a few times, we will come up with a version of the future that you and I and Bembos can't even imagine. Yeah. If we talked another 5 years from now, I'm pretty sure it'll be well in action. Yeah. And so I'm encouraging people not to just to sink everything they've got into all the diversities without remembering to look for the wise elders.
The insight that comes with age. I was talking with Ronnie because we do our walks through this, as I laughingly say. I don't say it anymore because it's not really true. But when we started COVID, Ronnie would take me out for my walk. I was like, I need to get him out of the house. But on the walk yesterday, I was saying to her, it's fascinating for me because I was living through the burst of these bubbles that were created, like the IT bubble. I was I was IT director at the time, so I lived the pushing up of a share of the momentum of this mindset. It's never going to go down. There's no way. And so and then I thought to myself, I was just doing the math of how old would somebody who's really into cryptos be compared to how old I was at that time when I learned the lesson of bubble economies. Right. And I realized, they were like 8 years old. So this 8-year-old hadn't lived the global perception that nothing could happen. This is the future. Don't even think about it. And then the next thing they know, of course, the bubble burst. And so when you've lived through 3 or 4 of those, you actually become more conscious that, oh, this is another one of those moments that you remember from your past that they have never experienced. Yeah.
Yet.
That's exactly what the Gen Zers are doing. Don't forget, they lived through the repercussions of 9/11. They lived through the horrifying downturn of 2008.
Yeah.
They've lived through, the advent of talking about beheadings on the news in 2013.
Yeah.
I can tell you exactly when that started. They've lived through then everything the world has gone through with the beginnings of real notions about climate change, whole islands and people and culture sinking. This generation they have a sense of what's possible if they do nothing.
Yeah.
And it's a human nature as you get older to prioritize different. Maybe that's what I want to leave people with.
As you know, I'm prioritizing differently. I've got a villa in Spain in the mountains, which is basically as off-grid as I can get. And I will have hard time getting to the internet, have a journey into the city that doesn't have a proper supermarket, possibly. I don't even know yet. And I don't know who I'm going to be there. And there's an aspect of, wow, what does that look like in that world where things that I don't yet know of myself? And that's another moment of discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, if you're clear about your purpose and then every setback or every advance, you really manage the meaning of it, you're going to have another delightful journey.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've often embraced this could be the worst, and I say it jokingly, but it's true. This could be the worst decision I ever made, but that isn't really true because I never look in the world in those terms, but right. I say it just because it's easiest to say, is that who knows what's going to come out of this? Because if I overly play how great it is, then I have to now live to an expectation. And so I'll figure it out when I get there. But I do have to say I am excited because if I wasn't, I wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, well, expectations, I always say the secret to happiness is low expectations.
Yeah.
It's better to keep that horizon steady even when the boat is going like this. Just keep your eye on the horizon.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for chatting.
Thank you.
I'm going to leave people with one more thought of hope and just a little homework. I'm looking around us and seeing this podcast and other businesses in my community, businesses in the world, starting to pay attention to the impact they're having on each other. And I believe a gratitude economy is coming.
Yeah.
I think the attention economy of the last 100 years, where every single thing was done to grab and hold our attention, I think that's going. I think that's one more thing that the pandemic has proven us, that we are all sick of the chaos builders.
Well, I can tell you, us making this show an hour has certainly tested the boundaries of people's attention.
Well,
I agree.
There may be people that are super grateful for one little thing that you or I or Bamboo said that changes their day. And then we're going to come back. We need to start supporting the people that make us feel grateful.
Yeah.
I thank you for being here, because curiosity is the quickest way to being grateful.
Yeah, I feel the same. Thank you for being with us. And obviously we'll have the next show because we never discuss anything we put on as a title anyway. So we'll just sit and talk for an hour. We should say an hour with Dr. Lynda Ulrich. That should be the title of the next show.
And we'll let it go where it needs to go.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a great day.
A lot of love. Yeah. And I mean, I guess we point people who want more information, they'll go to everwideningscircles.com. Is that right?
Yeah. everwideningscircles.com. That's a mouthful. So we are at ewc.co.
Okay.
And, I do want to not let this opportunity go by to tell people that seek signs of goodness and progress. That's how you're going to find it. You're going to have to seek it. The internet will not bring it to you.
Yeah.
And neither will the news. So seek it. We are trying to put one foot in front of the other and be a part of that. So are you. We have a summit coming up, the second Conspiracy of Goodness Summit on October 10th,
October
where we
10th.
are bringing together five incredible people who have lived lives of extraordinary challenge, that have found a way to make the world a better place, even with the challenges they face. And they are we have one gal who's speaking who was homeless just 6 years ago, and now she's been the right hand woman for many at NASA. She's a friend of all the current astronauts.
Yeah.
We have another woman who lost her legs in a boat accident at age 22, and she looks at that as something that will be the most important positive thing that could have happened in her life. I mean, we need to hear from people who can turn challenges into new paths, because that's what we're all facing. None of us are exempt from challenge. If we can, like you said, mentor ourselves into finding our own purpose by surrounding ourselves with lovely people, that's going to get us down the path.
I could not agree more. If we surround ourselves with people who rise us up, then that is the surefirest way to shift your mindset.
Yeah.
It's not easy though, because we get addicted to the old ones, so that can be a problem. But that's another show.
Yes.
Surrounding yourself with idiots. That's the. Love you.
All right. Have a great day.
Bye. We love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I was thinking,
are you going to say, am I the idiot or are you the idiot? What are you looking at? When
I was thinking, that's a lot of judgment. No?
Of course it is. I got criticized by once because I have the fun in the titles and I play. And then someone was like, hey, that's clickbait, and I went, clickbait is like when you put in a title that gets people to click on it with the intention of pulling them in to your subject matter.
Yeah.
And I was like, and at first I saw myself actually defending, like, no, that's kind of that's the heart of what people judge in that subject. That's what I was saying. And then he said, Andy, clickbait isn't a bad thing. And then I laughed and he said, oh, I started to see he was twisting the tools I used against me, which was nice.
I love that.
I know you would. So tomorrow,
Thursday,
creeps in this petty pace from day to day. Do you know who we have on tomorrow?
I have no idea. Then
we leave it at that. Thank you for being with us again. And it was really, I must say, when we get Lynda on, there's something that I love in two things that what she'll do is when we go down any route which doesn't allow the vision for what the positive would be, that she always makes sure that we follow back to that positive. And she'll often give things practically you can do to shift that in yourself, which I really love.
Yeah.
And she jokingly said, we don't like personal help. And it's not that we don't like personal help. It's that it isn't the focus of the show. That's the idea. So, and we'll have her on again, obviously, if she'll have us. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Have a beautiful
day.
And we'll see you tomorrow on
A Wonderful
Chaos.
Could you be any more enthusiastic?